I said yes to helping my coworker with a project last week, even though I was already drowning in my own deadlines. I said yes to attending a birthday party for someone I barely know, even though I desperately needed that Saturday to rest. I said yes to lending money to a friend who's never paid me back, even though I'm trying to save for something that actually matters to me. And when my sister asked me to babysit her kids for the third weekend in a row, you know what I said? Yes, of course, no problem. Happy to help. And then I hung up the phone and felt this wave of resentment wash over me. Not at her, at myself. Because I didn't want to say yes. I wanted to say no. I needed to say no. But the word wouldn't come out. It got stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth, blocked by this invisible force that's been controlling my life for as long as I can remember. Fear, guilt, this desperate need to be liked. And I realized I'm not just being helpful, I'm people-pleasing, and it's slowly destroying me. If you've ever said yes when you meant no, if you've ever sacrificed your own needs to avoid disappointing someone else, if you've ever felt resentful about commitments you made because you couldn't find the courage to decline, this is for you. Because the inability to say no isn't about being nice. It's not about being generous or helpful or selfless. It's about something much deeper and much more painful. It's about not believing that your needs matter as much as everyone else's. And understanding why you can't say no might be the first step to finally setting yourself free. Let me explain what's really happening when you can't say no. On the surface, it looks like kindness. You're the person everyone can count on, the reliable one, the one who shows up, who helps out, who never lets anyone down. People love you for it. They call you a good friend, a team player, someone with a big heart, and you've built your entire identity around being that person. But underneath all of that, there's something else going on, something you might not even realize. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you're sending yourself a message. You're telling yourself that other people's comfort is more important than your own, that their time is more valuable than yours. That disappointing them is worse than betraying yourself. And over time, that message becomes a belief that you don't matter as much as they do. Psychologists call this people-pleasing, and it's rooted in what's known as the fawn response. You've probably heard of fight or flight, the two ways our nervous system responds to threat. But there's actually a third response that doesn't get talked about enough: fawn. When fighting feels too dangerous and running isn't an option, some people learn to survive by pleasing, by making themselves useful, by becoming whatever the other person needs them to be. And if you learned this early, if you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where you had to earn affection by being good, by being helpful, by never causing problems, then your nervous system got wired to associate approval with safety. Saying no meant risking rejection, and rejection to a child feels like a threat to survival. So you learn to say yes, always yes, even when it hurt, even when it cost you, because yes meant you were safe. Yes meant you were loved. Yes meant you wouldn't be abandoned. And that wiring doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. It stays with you. It becomes the lens through which you see every request, every favor, every expectation. And before you even consciously think about it, your mouth is saying yes while your heart is screaming no. Here's what makes this so insidious. The people in your life don't know you're struggling. They don't see the internal war you're fighting every time they ask you for something. To them, you're just helpful, generous, kind. They're not trying to take advantage of you. They're just accepting what you keep offering. And because you never say no, they never learn where your boundaries are. They don't know that you're exhausted, resentful, drowning in commitments you never wanted to make. Because you smile and say yes, so they assume you're happy to help. And the cycle continues. I had a friend who was the embodiment of this. She was the person everyone called when they needed something. Moving? Call her. Need a ride to the airport at 5 in the morning? She's there. Emotional crisis at midnight? She'll talk you through it. And everyone loved her. But I watched her slowly fall apart. She was constantly exhausted. She never had time for herself. Her own goals kept getting pushed aside because she was too busy helping everyone else achieve theirs. And one day she broke down crying and said something I'll never forget. "I don't even know what I want anymore. I've spent so long being what everyone else needs that I don't know who I am without them." That's what saying yes all the time does to you. It erases you. Slowly, quietly, until you're just a collection of other people's needs and expectations with nothing left for yourself. So why can't you say no? Let's break down the psychology. First, there's the fear of rejection. This is the big one. For people who can't say no, rejection doesn't just feel bad. It feels catastrophic because somewhere deep down, you believe that your worth is tied to your usefulness. If you're not helping, if you're not making other people happy, then what value do you have? This belief usually comes from childhood. Maybe you had a parent who only showed affection when you behaved a certain way. Maybe love in your house was conditional, something you had to earn. Maybe you learned that being good, being helpful, being easy was the only way to get attention or approval. So you became the good kid, the one who never caused trouble, the one who always helped out. And it worked. People liked you, praised you, told you how mature and responsible you were. But what you didn't realize is that you were training yourself to equate love with service, to believe that people only valued you for what you could do for them, not for who you were. Then there's guilt. Oh, the guilt. People who can't say no carry guilt like a second skin. You feel guilty for taking up space, guilty for having needs, guilty for even considering putting yourself first. Because somehow you've internalized the message that your needs are less important than everyone else's, that asking for something or declining to give is selfish. So when someone asks you for a favor and you feel that resistance inside, that voice saying, "I don't want to do this," immediately the guilt rushes in. Who are you to say no? They need help. You're capable of helping. What kind of person refuses when someone needs them? And the guilt is so overwhelming, so uncomfortable, that saying yes feels like the only way to make it stop. But here's the thing, that guilt isn't rational. It's not based on reality. It's based on a distorted belief system that says your value comes from serving others. And until you challenge that belief, the guilt will keep controlling you. There's also something called conflict avoidance. People who can't say no are often people who can't handle confrontation. The thought of someone being upset with you, disappointed in you, angry at you, it's unbearable. So you avoid it at all costs. You say yes to keep the peace, to maintain harmony, to make sure everyone likes you. Because if someone's mad at you, your nervous system interprets that as danger. Your body floods with anxiety. Your brain screams, "Fix it, make them happy, do whatever it takes." And saying yes is the quickest way to resolve that discomfort. But what you don't realize is that you're trading short-term relief for long-term resentment. Because every time you say yes to avoid conflict with someone else, you're creating conflict with yourself. You're betraying your own needs, your own boundaries, your own well-being. And that internal conflict, that's the one that actually destroys you. And then there's the identity piece. For many people who can't say no, being helpful has become their entire personality. It's how they're known. It's how they relate to others. If you ask them to describe themselves, they'll say things like, "I'm the person my friends call when they need something," or "I'm always there for people." Their self-worth is so deeply tied to being useful that they don't know who they'd be if they stopped. There's this fear that if you start saying no, people will stop needing you. And if they stop needing you, they'll stop wanting you around. You'll become irrelevant, forgettable, alone. So you keep saying yes, keep making yourself indispensable, keep exhausting yourself because at least it means you matter to someone. But here's what nobody tells you. People don't actually respect someone who never says no. They might like you, they might appreciate you, they might use you, but they don't respect you. Because respect requires boundaries. When you have no boundaries, when you're always available, always agreeable, always accommodating, people don't see you as generous. They see you as easy, as a given. as someone whose time and energy can be taken for granted. And worst of all, you start to see yourself that way too. You stop valuing your own time because you've taught everyone, including yourself, that it has no value. I learned this the hard way. I had a friend who would text me at all hours asking for advice, venting about her problems, expecting me to drop everything to support her. And I always did, every time, until one day I couldn't. I was going through something, and I told her I didn't have the capacity to help her that day. And you know what she said? "Wow, that's not like you." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What's going on?" Just surprise and disappointment that I wasn't performing my assigned role. And that's when I realized I had trained her to expect my yes. I had taught her that my needs were always negotiable, that I would always make space for her, regardless of what I was dealing with. And she wasn't a bad person. She was just responding to the pattern I had created, the boundary I had never set. So what does constantly saying yes cost you? Let me be really honest about this. It costs you your time. Every yes to someone else is a no to yourself. Every hour you spend doing something you don't want to do is an hour you can't spend on something that actually matters to you. Your goals, your rest, your joy, they all get pushed aside because you're too busy fulfilling obligations you never wanted in the first place. It costs you your energy, physical and emotional. You're running on empty because you're constantly giving, with no time to refill. You're exhausted, burnt out, running on fumes, and you can't figure out why you're always so tired when all you're doing is helping people. But that's exactly why. Because helping is draining when it's not reciprocal, when it's not voluntary, when it's coming from obligation instead of genuine desire. It costs you your authenticity. When you're always saying yes, you're not being real. You're performing. You're being the version of yourself that you think people want, instead of who you actually are. And over time, you lose touch with your real self. You don't know what you actually want because you've spent so long prioritizing what everyone else wants. You don't know what you like because you've been too busy accommodating everyone else's preferences. You become a mirror, reflecting back whatever the other person needs, with nothing genuine left underneath. And it costs you respect, both from others and from yourself. When you never say no, people stop asking if you're okay with something. They just assume. They take your yes for granted, and you start to resent them for it, even though you're the one who created this dynamic. But more damaging than their lack of respect is your own. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you're telling yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your boundaries don't deserve to be honored, that you're not worth protecting. And that self-betrayal, that constant choosing of others over yourself, it destroys your self-respect piece by piece until you don't even recognize the person you've become. Here's something that might shock you. Saying no is not mean. It's not selfish. It's not rude. It's honest. When you say no, you're actually doing everyone a favor. You're being clear about your capacity. You're not making promises you can't keep. You're not building resentment that will poison the relationship later. You're respecting both yourself and the other person enough to tell the truth. Because a resentful yes is worse than an honest no. A resentful yes says, "I'll do this, but I'll hate you for asking, and hate myself for agreeing, and our relationship will suffer because I'm not actually okay with this, but I'm going to pretend I am." An honest no says, "I care about you, but I can't do this right now, and I'm trusting that our relationship is strong enough to handle that truth." But learning to say no when you've spent your whole life saying yes is terrifying. It feels like you're being a bad person, like you're letting people down, like you're going to lose everyone you care about. And I'm not going to lie, some people will react badly. The people who were used to your automatic yes, who benefited from your inability to set boundaries, they might get upset. They might call you selfish. They might accuse you of changing, of not being the person you used to be. And they're right. You're not the person you used to be. You used to be someone who betrayed themselves to make others comfortable. And now you're becoming someone who honors their own needs. That's not a bad thing. That's growth. That's healing. And if someone can't handle you having boundaries, that tells you everything you need to know about why they were in your life in the first place. So how do you start saying no? First, You have to recognize that no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't have to justify your boundaries. No, I can't is enough. No, that doesn't work for me is enough. No, I'm not available is enough. The urge to over-explain comes from guilt, from this feeling that you need to prove your no is valid, but you don't. Your no is valid because you said it. That's the only justification it needs. Second, start small. You don't have to go from saying yes to everything to saying no to everything. Start with low-stakes situations. The coworker who asked you to cover their shift when you were planning to rest. The friend who wants to meet up when you're exhausted. The email that asks for your time when you're already overwhelmed. Practice saying no in situations where the consequences are minimal. Build the muscle. Get comfortable with the discomfort, because it will be uncomfortable. Your nervous system will freak out, the guilt will flood in, but that discomfort is temporary. The resentment from saying yes when you meant no, that lasts. Third, notice the pattern. Pay attention to when you say yes and what's driving it. Is it fear of rejection? Is it guilt? Is it the need to be liked? Is it conflict avoidance? Understanding your why makes it easier to challenge the behavior. When you feel the automatic yes rising up, pause. Ask yourself, do I actually want to do this? Or am I just scared of what will happen if I say no? That pause, that moment of awareness, that's where change begins. And fourth, surround yourself with people who respect your no. The right people, the people who actually care about you, will not only accept your boundaries, they'll celebrate them. They'll be glad you're taking care of yourself. They'll respect you more, not less. And the people who get angry when you set boundaries, the ones who make you feel guilty for having needs, those aren't your people. They never were. They were just people who benefited from your inability to protect yourself. And losing them isn't a loss. It's a liberation. Here's what I've learned. Saying no is an act of self-respect. It's you telling the world, and more importantly, telling yourself that your needs matter, that your time has value, that you're not just a resource for other people to extract from. You're a person, a whole person, with limits and needs and desires that deserve to be honored. And when you start saying no, when you start protecting your energy and your time and your peace, something beautiful happens. The right people stay, the ones who love you for who you are, not what you do for them. And you finally get to meet yourself, the real you, the one who's been buried under all those obligatory yeses, the one who has preferences and boundaries and a life that belongs to them. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if it's just to yourself. How many things are you currently doing that you don't actually want to be doing? How many commitments are you carrying that you resented the moment you agreed to them? How many people in your life would disappear if you stopped being useful to them? And what would your life look like if you gave yourself permission to say no? If you protected your time the way you protect everyone else's feelings? If you valued your peace as much as you value being liked? Drop a comment and tell me, what's the hardest thing for you to say no to? Is it family, friends, work? And what do you think would happen if you actually said it? Because I guarantee there are thousands of people reading this who are struggling with the exact same thing, who are exhausted from saying yes, who are drowning in obligations they never wanted. And sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes it easier to start making different choices. And if this video helped you understand why you can't say no, if it gave you permission to start prioritizing yourself, hit that subscribe button. I make videos every week exploring the psychology behind our behaviors, why we do what we do, and how understanding ourselves better can help us live more authentically. This channel is for people who are ready to stop betraying themselves to make others comfortable, who are ready to set boundaries even when it's scary, who believe that self-respect is more important than being liked by everyone. Before I go, I want to leave you with this. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to prioritize yourself without being selfish. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to be unavailable. You're allowed to protect your peace even if it makes someone else uncomfortable, because your life is yours, your time is yours, your energy is yours, and giving it away out of guilt or fear or obligation isn't generosity. It's self-abandonment, and you deserve better than that. So the next time someone asks you for something and you feel that automatic yes rising up, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, is this a yes I want to give? Or is this a no I'm too afraid to say? And whatever the answer is, honor it. Choose yourself, not because you're selfish, but because you finally understand that you matter too. That your needs are just as important as everyone else's, and that saying no to them is really saying yes to yourself. Thank you for being here. Thank you for trusting me with your time. I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Until then, practice your no. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but I promise you, it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself.